Hello to the world and welcome to the CMAC Town Hall. I'll start with this town hall today. It's sharp 1 p.m. in Germany, Frankfurt time. I see lots of people are coming into the room, and I think everybody who enters the room gets some automatic voice telling them what's going to happen. So I'm just talking a little bit over that, and I think in a few minutes we will be able to start with it when the number of people coming into this room, into this town hall meeting is more or less, calming down a little. At the moment, we do have lots of people coming in. List is growing, which I see here on my second screen. We are at the number of 30 people being in the room. We actually have 118 people being registered for this town hall today. So we still have a gap of 70 to 80 people coming into this webinar. And as usual, people are some people would come from the lunch break, but I also see people from overseas. So some people are coming from before breakfast. See some people from the US. Also see some people are from the Asian region. So they're probably looking into dinner. So everybody's busy with something. Some people are coming out of meetings and jumping into this one. We are very happy to see so many people being interested in that CMAC town hall here. Obviously, the extraordinary MEPC hit the news quite heavily in the last 2 weeks. I guess almost everybody coming into this town hall has a more or less good idea of the MEPC outcomes, or basically not outcomes because there weren't any, but we will hear about that. But today with this town hall, we would like to give you a deeper dive into the things that were happening in the MEPC meeting in the week before last week. And then also last week, there was this intersessional working group on greenhouse gases taking place at the IMO, where also some discussion have been continued. And CMAC, in the person of Leo Bodicin, has been able to be in the room and listen to the discussions. And now we will be hearing today the first-hand information from Leo Bodicin, explaining and reporting about all the things happening in the past 2 weeks at IMO. Maybe in the beginning, I could also include some advertisement for some other events, just do that verbally, but we will be also doing some announcements on our website, LinkedIn channel, and via our newsletter. For everyone who's going to travel to Shanghai in the beginning of December and participate in the Marine Tech Trade Fair, I can already announce that we will be hosting a CMAC circle on a Thursday morning of Marine Tech, and we are gathering a good group of panelists for this panel discussion. We will have a great keynote speaker, and the overall topic of that CMAC circle will be the topic of ammonia. And in this panel discussion, the attendees will learn what's the take of the CMAC members, respectively the engine makers, on the topic of ammonia from Chinese and Japanese engine makers, and also from we will also hear from the Maersk-Mcmillan Center of Decarbonization in Maritime Industry what their stake is, and we also have a panelist from the perspective of the fuel suppliers. And so this will be a round panel discussion of the topic of ammonia. And obviously in China, there's lots of development around ammonia and the supply chains and the offtake, and lots of engines are ready to be installed. And so this will be a comprehensive event, and whoever is going to be there at Marine Tech in Shanghai, mark it in your calendar. Thursday morning of Marine Tech will be the CMAC circle. And as I said just before, there will be more detailed announcements and advertisement on our usual channels, website, LinkedIn, and newsletter. So that being said, I would like also to give it give you information that we are going to record this session here today. Matter of fact, the recording has already started, and the recording will be made available on the CMAC website, as we also did with the other town halls we held previously, and we will also do with the future ones. So whoever is not able to be on that one day, on that hour, able to attend this town hall will be able to see the recording on our website. I think that's very helpful and informative for everyone. Yeah, long speech in the beginning. 5 minutes are already done. I think we can now start with the actual content. And the moment I see 42 people in the room, I guess more people will join even on the run, but that's fine. I would like now to hand over to my colleague Leo Budicin. As I said in the beginning, he's our IMO coordinator. He was able to attend the MEPC meeting the week before last week, and last week the Intersessional Working Group on Greenhouse Gases. And as a matter of fact, he was sharing the time of the MEPC meeting the week before with our accredited representative of CMAC towards the IMO, who's Ero Letevara from ABB. Both of them have been sharing the time. Like the first half of the week, Ero was in place, and then the second half of the week, Leo was attending the meeting. And then last week it was Leo by himself in the representing CMAC at the IMO in the Intersessional Working Group. So the title of today's town hall is Extraordinary MEPC, NZF Postponed. What's next? I think that's the biggest question everybody is raising here and attending this meeting. And I think, Leo, it's now up to you to answer the question. What was happening at IMO the last 2 weeks? Please go ahead.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks everyone for joining today. And it's very nice to see such a high number, which also points to that MEPC meeting, which was really extraordinary. So a little bit to start with why have we been in London at the IMO 2 weeks ago. So the main point was, as you are all aware, to adopt the amendments to Annex 6 of the MARPOL Convention, which would consequently put into force the IMO net zero framework, which has two main components, I would say. The one on the global fuel standard, so gradual cuts in the fuel GHG intensity, calculated on a well to wake base, and a pricing mechanism, so a carbon price on shipping emission to drive compliance. The net zero framework actually, let's say, that founds a little bit its basis, or better said, that the first time when we talked when we outlined net zero shipping by 2050 was in the 2023 IMO strategy on GHG emissions, which is actually at the moment the only certain or the only adopted thing that we have. So you see on the right side of the slide, that was the timetable, that was the timeline that that has been foreseen. So we have had the approval of the framework in April this year during the MEPC 83 meeting, and then we were expecting, or at least we were going for the adoption during the extraordinary, which took place 2 weeks ago, but actually that, as we all know, didn't happen. And the earliest entry into force, which was foreseen for March 2027, has now obviously changed. So during the extraordinary MEPC meeting, what was supposed to happen was the adoption of the framework, and then consequently the guidelines were to be defined in the working groups there were to follow. Nevertheless, as you all know, the MEPC, the extraordinary MEPC, turned to be something else than planned. So, as you know, it took place 2 weeks ago, from the 14th to the 17th of October. And I must say that the uncertainty and the surprises increased as the days went by. I think that all of us that were there, or all of us that were following this process, thought when the MEPC started that there are real chances that the framework would be adopted. But as the days were going by, we have seen, I could even express myself in saying, a kind of chaos that was entering the main hall of the IMO, a work of the process of the IMO which has been practically unseen so far. We have seen also that the atmosphere in the room got tensed, the tension increased. Rule of procedures and the secretariat has been challenged. Many delegations were calling upon the rule of procedures on different articles in order to propose several votes. As you know, there has been, of course, the vote to adjourn the meeting, but before that there were several other proposals that have been put forward. And I think also that overall has been quite challenging for the Secretariat, which have found itself while handling very well the situation, but also in an unprecedented situation. So we have seen over the days that the coalition against the framework was becoming, if I can say, stronger, or it was really building around this initial axis of countries that were not in favor of the framework as it is conceived today. You have probably read also from the news that it seems that there have been alleged threats to several delegations. Corridor lobbying has been something that we could really see everywhere. In every break, in every moment, there were delegations talking, there were people talking all around the IMO, inside the main hall, outside. There have been also delegations that have claimed that actual decisions are being taken or discussed even outside the building. So it really has been an unprecedented meeting, which at the end, which we saw in the result of the vote, of course, we saw a shifting of positions if we compare that to what was the result of the vote in April this year. We have had during the course of the meeting also a post on Truth Social from the US president, and this is just to give the dimension that the whole framework took, that it became something not anymore only technical, but it became something much larger. And we can actually say that the MEPC extraordinary meeting was also and very much about geopolitics. This is one of the pictures that I've taken in the main hall, in the plenary room, that you have probably seen because it was shared quite a lot. And this actually respects quite well the atmosphere and the situation during the meeting. These big delegations or different delegations that were talking together with the Secretary General, trying to find a way out, because as I said, as days were going by, the uncertainty was becoming bigger and bigger. But actually, what is quite important to say is that usually the decision making at the IMO is based on consensus. This is the practice that has persisted until now, or in the big majority of the cases. But when it comes to the net zero framework and its adoption, we have seen a very fragmented IMO. We have had on one side the opposition to it that was building around the countries, or the one that were more vocal, the US, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and others. And on the other side, the one that were very much advocating the framework and its adoption, namely the EU countries, Brazil, Canada, and on that side we have, of course, also other. So what have actually happened is that during the days there was very difficult to come to a decision or to move forward, whether into adoption or to rejections. There were calls for votes in this direction, but actually something got a little bit stuck. We were in an impasse that was not easy, to be honest, to get out of it. And also going for a vote of adoption in that circumstances where it was quite risky, to have risked also to have the whole framework falling. So actually what have happened is that Saudi Arabia, so the, let's say, the opposing side that were opposing the framework in its current form, called for a vote to adjourn the meeting by 1 year. And this motion got the necessary vote to be passed. So there were 57 countries that voted in favor to adjourn, 49 against, 21 abstained, and 8 of those that submitted credentials to vote did not participate. So as we've seen, there was a majority, a clear majority that was in favor of the adjournment, and so everything for the moment has been postponed to 1 year. Discussion can be resumed. So another extraordinary MEPC, we're going to have it in October, probably 2026. This is a little bit just to give you an overview or an impression how did the position change, or how did the countries voted and how it changed. Of course, what it's needed to be stressed that a vote to adjourn the extraordinary MEPC meeting doesn't necessarily mean a vote to oppose it or not to adopt it. So this is still to be seen, but this needs to be, I think this needs to be clear. So in April, when the framework was approved, there were 63 countries that voted for the approvals, with an opposition of 16 and an abstention of 24. In the second or in the bottom of the graph, actually you see that 57 countries, as I said before, were in favor of the adjournment, but overall that there were 24 countries more in the vote that took place in October, and that also a little bit points to the importance that the extraordinary meeting had, and that somehow, for whatever reason, but it gathered the interest of more parties and more countries to being present in the room 2 weeks ago. The major changes that we have actually seen is that the EU countries did not vote fully compact, meaning that we had Greece and Cyprus that abstained, but we also had 2 other countries that in April supported the framework, namely China, India, the Republic of Korea, and Japan, that shifted or changed their vote patterns. So China and India decided to vote for the postponement, while Korea and Japan abstained. On the right side of the slide, you have also an overview on how the top flag state by tonnage have voted, and this is important for a future acceptance or a possible acceptance if it comes to an explicit acceptance, which I will explain later. Of course, the gross tonnage counts in the vote and the criteria that needs to be fulfilled to either accept it or reject it. So we see here the 9 top flag states and how they voted, having actually only 4 of them. Actually, no, sorry. 3 of them that were not for the German, and the other were actually in favor of it. One of the biggest, or one of the reasons that were put forward of why to oppose the framework and why it poses problems for some countries were that the framework would create a patchwork of regional regulations. And also, I have copy-pasted here the statement ahead of the meeting that was issued by the European Commission. It's DG Move, so it's the Directorate for Mobility and Transport, which said that, of course, the European Commission supports the framework, but upon adoption, it will review the relevant EU regulation in place. And that argument has been taken by the opponent, saying that the European Commission indeed said that it will review its ETS regulation that that EU countries have in place, but without giving concrete reference on how would they do that and what will be the outcome. But nevertheless, with the adjournment of the meeting, we are now in a situation where we do have regional regulation in place. So we now have a patchwork which has been argued over regional regulations. We have at least 5 of those. Some are already in place, like in the EU and the associated countries. The UK, if I'm not mistaken, will come into force next year. But there are also other similar regulations that we can find in California and the United States, in China, and also Turkey. So the situation is fragmented now, and of course the non-adoption, the adjournment poses uncertainty, especially for the industry, which needs a clear regulatory framework in which to move in order to be able to invest. So we are now in a year which uncertainty will persist. One of the discussions that took place during the MEPC, so the extraordinary MEPC, is how actually, in case it is adopted, how the framework would be accepted. So it was foreseen, or the plan was that the framework would have been approved in a following a tacit procedure, which means that amendments enter into force automatically on a set date, unless enough states object, and that would have been after 10 months. But also this way of moving forward, this acceptance procedure has been challenged. It is automatically foreseen to be adopted, but there is still the possibility for member state, for a group of member states to object, and the conditions for the objections are 1/3 of contracting governments objecting, or having states representing at least 50% of world tonnage, and that's why I showed before the top flags by tonnage, so which gives already a kind of possible indication. But this tacit procedure, which is automatic, but it anyways gives the possibility to object, is the usual acceptance procedure that is practiced at the IMO. But there have been a group of, so the one that oppose, a group of countries that put forward or they want to go forward in case of adoption to go with the explicit procedure, which would require the amendments in order to have them entering into force to be actively accepted by the member states. This, of course, requires some criteria to be met, and these are 2/3 of contracting governments and also 50% of the world gross storage. It has been argued that such an acceptance could still be in the time frame of the 10 months, but we know that in practice, when it comes for a member state to adopting it at home through national parliaments or whatever it's their internal procedure, that this procedure, it's very likely to be delayed if we would go for this kind of acceptance. But this is for sure be one of the topic that will be on the table as we discuss also in the next MEPC 84 meeting. So the possible scenarios to go forward, this is of course a list or a possibility, not exhaustive. So first of all, we have now the amendments that are on the table, and we can have it. We can go further with them as they are, or we can have a revised version. If it would be revised right now, it's very difficult to say in which direction would it go, whether it would be watered down a little, a lot, or I mean, for the moment, options are all on the table. And from that, we would move to the vote, to have a vote on adoption, which was what we expected to happen 2 weeks ago and didn't happen. So here, of course, the possibilities are two. We can, so the IMO can come, or the vote can be a no, and then the whole thing's false, or we can have an adoption, and then we would move forward with the process. We would then come to the acceptance, and acceptance goes back to what I have just explained, still to be decided, or if, since it has been a challenge, whether we would go for a tacit or an explicit acceptance, which could change, of course, also the outcome of the adoption. And in case it is accepted through one or the other mechanism, then we would go to the enforcement. But even here, when you come to the enforcement, the things are not easy, because of course we could have the ideal situation, what we would all wish for, an adoption followed by acceptance and enforcement. But some countries have already said it and put forward a little bit that idea that they, if the framework is to be adopted like it is today, or some said also in any other form, that they would opt out. So this is also an option to go through all the process, to have also the acceptance to come, but when it comes to the enforcement, then having countries that might not go for its enforcement, then of course would weaken the framework itself. So this is the situation which would have happened with some countries today. So if on one side we can of course argue and we can say, and it is totally true, that we are now in a situation of uncertainty, but we have given also another year to work on it together, to find common ground, to find a compromise in order to avoid this worst case scenario where we would have, if that would be the case, an enforcement where someone opt out, which is of course not what we are looking for. So we are left with quite a big degree of uncertainty. Right now, all options are still on the table. We have started, or we have continued the work in the intersessionally in the work that took in the working group that took place last week. I will talk about it later. So there is progress, but there is the need for the industry for regulatory certainty in order to have a real framework that would allow and that would boost investments, and that is actually what the industry was waiting for. The industry representatives through NGOs or that were present in the at the IMO in the plenary room during the extraordinary meeting, talking with them, and I think I can say that the general idea is that the industry supports the framework, maybe doesn't agree 100% on this or that measure, or how one thing is done, would rather do another, but that was in favor or continuing with it and adopting it. But now we find ourselves having a bit of a different timeline. So as I have said, some of the process is already behind us. So the approval in April is done. We have had the adjournment 2 weeks ago, which have changed the course of action, of course. And we have already continued with the work on the guidelines the last week in London. What will happen next before the next MEPC extraordinary? We still don't have the exact date, but prior to that, we still have another meeting of the intersessional working group on reduction of greenhouse gases, gas emissions from ships will take place in spring, when the work on the guidelines will continue. We will have an MEPC, the MEPC 84 at the end of April 2026, where we will have a state of play, where there are still some issues that need to be clarified, that need to be discussed. There were also other amendments that were due to be adopted now, and that were not linked to the framework, which will be on the agenda. And then we will come in a year time to be decided yet, the exact dates, to a new extraordinary meeting, hopefully with a proposal that can be put to vote and be adopted. So also the timeline for the entry into force have changed, and the earliest now date for the framework to be adopted is March 2028. Whether this is realistic or not, or it will be further delayed, this is still to be seen. But this is more or less, or what have happened in that 4 very busy and exciting days. But then we have moved forward last week with the intersessional working group on GHG emission, which took place from Monday to Friday. And I must say that there the situation and the atmosphere was, of course, different. It is true that the decision of the adjournment and the not adoption was hanging. There was many mentioning the fact that we still don't have a framework, and that it might be premature, or that it is premature for some, and they believe, to discuss on guidelines. But there has been also those, the other side, that were saying that actually there is no reason not to continue to work on the guidelines, which is what can actually bring us together, what can help us to find the common ground and to find a proposal that can then be adopted. Of course, all the discussions were preceded with a bit of a standard sentence that everything that we discussed is without prejudice to the adoption, a possible adoption in a year time. But indeed, a lot has been discussed. It has been a good discussions. If we would then have to put it in what has been, what were the concrete recommendation, conclusion, or suggestion of the intersessional working groups into working group, well, here it's more to still be the work to be continued on the next session. So no big or very important conclusions, but things have been discussed. So of course, the first thing that was on the agenda, the first item was the guidelines. And in that context, we started with the fuel certification. And the first topic was the guidelines on the requirements and procedures for the recognition of sustainable fuels certification schemes. So the list of recognized certification schemes were supposed to be published, or at least available, in starting from March 2027. But of course, now the timeline for that is uncertain. It has been highlighted that there is the need to address issues in further work of the group, such as traceability, data confidentiality, capacity building, and the need of national scheme, as well as technical cooperation and risk of fraud. When it comes to, let's say, the center issue of a certification scheme, and which is the application process, which has been discussed, here we have seen again a little bit of a fragmented or diverging position, and we have seen most delegations that have favored a direct recognition of scheme owners by the IMO. But on the other side, we have had also those that were supporting member state endorsement, or at least showing flexibility. So again, this is a thing that needs to be further discussed and further decided, and it's gonna go again on the agenda of the net intersessional working group. There was also the issue that there are some existing schemes that are already in place for other mechanisms, and that we could use those temporarily. But the overall sentiment, I think, is that there is a need to focus on guidelines rather than on interim solutions. When we come to the fuel life cycle and the label guidelines and the chain of custody models, so it has been proposed an fuel life cycle label that would a new template that would cover the well to tank section, and there was support for developing separate FFL guidelines based on it that would, as I said, limiting the scope to well to tank. This, of course, would require the LCA guidelines to be amended. We know that right now the IMO tracks the well to wake, but the FLL, this new template, would focus on, as I said, the well to tank, to avoid duplication and highlight upstream differences between fuel. So, but there is still work that needs to be done on the FLL guidelines, and this includes also numbering, the last mile emission, non-fuel energy, and other things. For the chain of custody model, on the other side, several models have been discussed: the segregated, the mass balance, the book and the claim. But while there is still and there is interest to explore them, for the moment, the group has decided to keep all options open, and this will be also further discussed in spring 2026. When it comes to the guidelines related to zero or near zero GHG emissions, of course, here we talk about Z and Zs that cover technologies, fuels, and energy sources. The first thing that I found, I would say everyone to agree, is that there need to be fuel and technologically neutral. But when it comes to the approach, then we have different views. We have a broad approach that sees reward for all Z and Zs that reduce emission compared to the GFI reference, which is valued on a well-to-wake basis. And this includes also biofuels, biomass blends, renewables, so wind, solar, shore power, but also technologies like CCS that would mostly help the transition and inclusivity of developing states. But on the other side, we have also those that have argued that the rewards should be target only novel fuels and technologies that needs scale up with Z and Zs limited to those below the GFI threshold and excluding technologies like the OCCS or conventional fuel-based measures. Of course, they must be they must comply with the LCA sustainability criteria and avoid any indirect land use change. And there are still concerns that remains on limited market data, hidden cost, and implementation complexity. The IMO Net Zero Fund was also a topic that was discussed during the extraordinary MEPC and that still doesn't find a common agreement. We have here differing views. One, of course, the usual that says that is premature and it's outside the IMO mandate, especially given the amount of billions of euros that should collect. That should even be a separate convention or agreement, not in the MARPOL. So this is quite an important discussion. And to say from the very beginning, there is no agreement of the IMO Net Zero Fund. It still needs to be further discussed. But when it comes to the governance, there is for sure a priority for the governing board provisions, and also to build on existing funds that are already existing. And last point here, that disbursement or payment which will happen must be fair, transparent, and supporting the transition and the developing countries. We have then moved to the calculation of the GFI and the GFI compliance approaches when it comes to the calculation. So delegation have in general supported a technology neutral GFI calculation that is based on the LCA guidelines and full well-to-wake emissions, but caution was urged on correction factors, multipliers, and also the links to the Z and Z rewards to ensure equity. There was also reference to ICE class ship and to take their specifics into account. And if we talk about renewable, so again, wind, shore, and solar power, there is maybe a higher or a bigger majority for effective energy to the ship as a preference method, but there are also still those or a part that favor a fuel equivalent approach. So also on this work is still to be continued at the next intersessional meeting. And the last part of this slide is the compliance Of course, that was quite clear. The GFI compliance guidelines should not go beyond the regulation. I would say that here is a little bit of a general backing of the IMO on that, but then when we use the diverge, when we talk about the voluntary cancellation of units outside the sector and on limiting surplus units, with quite some concern about double counting of safeguards. So work is still to be done also here, and so further work and further updates are foreseen to be submitted at the next intersessional working group meeting. And the last slide was the last agenda item that was considered was the development of the IMO life cycle GHG assessment framework. So here, the IMO Net Zero framework, of course, identifies the LAC guidelines as the basis for calculating GHG fuel intensity and certification, which then will serve as a key tool to assess the full life cycle impact of the marine fuels. So for the avoided and net negative emissions, there was a proposal to amend the so-called FAQ parameter. So the parameter that represents the emission from feedstock, extraction, cultivation, and acquisition, and have it to account for avoided and net negative emissions, particularly for biofuels and synthetic fuels. Here again, we have diverging views, as we have those that were that supported this, while others that caution about complexity, double counting, and the LIC approach mix. So it will be again, this issue actually has been agreed to be discussed and to invite a new proposal to be submitted for the MEPC 84 meeting in this case. For the power purchase agreement, we have discussed allowing power purchase agreements to determine the GHG intensity of electricity used in fuel productions. There are some that saw benefits for supporting zero net zero or near zero fuels, while again there was differing views and concerns that were raised about the verification scope and consistency. So even on this point, additional work needs to be done. On the new fuel pathway code for LNG with upstream CCS, so a new fuel pathway code for LNG with upstream CCS has been considered to the 2024 LCA guidelines, and there is a broad support for it. So there has been a recommendation to include this in the future in the future revision. There have been again some calls for allowing certified actual values for fossil pathway and not only those with CCS, while on the other side again the opposing position saying, which is true in this case, that guidelines currently do not permit this thing. So overall on this point we do need methodological clarity. One of the last things are the minimum requirements for geological storage of CO2. We have discussed it, setting minimum requirements. While there is general support of the delegation and our member states, it is not considered to be currently a priority. So future proposals will be submitted. And last thing is the sustainability themes and aspect that has been discussed to be included in the LCA guidelines. There is, of course, a general support when it comes to strengthening environmental aspect to align with biodiversity goals, But then if we talk about social and economic indicators here, there are concerns that this could disadvantage some countries. So so to sum up, this was a little bit what was discussed in the past week, a week full of discussion. And there was on the agenda also the IMO GFI registry and the fifth IMO DAG study, which will be further discussed again during the next intersessional meeting. So all work on the topics is to be continued. There have been advancement, there have been progress, but there is still a lot of work to be done to find that agreement that we need to adopt the framework. So we closed the meeting last week, or after those 2 weeks, I think that a general evaluation could be that uncertainty remains. That is true, but the work must keep moving forward in order to get to an agreement. And that would be it from my side, and I give back the floor to Daniel.
Daniel, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Now I have to repeat my very nice speech. I have to think about it. I think I said thank you, Leo, for this very informative, comprehensive presentation about the things happening at IMO in the past 2 weeks. I think they were very detailed and also very insightful, and also showing information which we're not able to found in the general media reports about the session last 2 weeks. I think that was very helpful. We did have some reactions in our chat, not so much in the chat room, but in the place where people can ask questions. There were a few questions coming in. I was trying to answer most of them. It started in the beginning with the voting results and which countries voted how and how did they change their opinions. I think I answered that via this tool here, but also you showed in your slide 7 the countries how they voted and how things were changing. There were a few things, very important question, but very difficult, or not being even able to answer the question if there will be the IMO NZF or something else in the future, depending on the outcomes of next year. Sorry. Then also the other question, if MEPC 84 is also touching on the NZF. I think it is. There's some topics on the agenda, on the preliminary agenda, saying greenhouse gas emissions from ships. So this will be covering that, I believe. There's one question I'm not really able to answer. Maybe you are, Leo. The question is, will the greenhouse gas strategy still be, according to the timeline, starting at 2028? Do you have any answer on that? With the greenhouse gas strategy, if that's still starting at 2028? Or do you have any updates?
I think that maybe Eero might have more details on that.
Eero, what's your take on the strategy? Yeah. Do you know something about that?
Thank you so much for throwing me under the bus. I think that it was said that with this 1 year delay in the decision making, that the current timelines are not possible to maintain, and that is one part of the discussions that are currently going on. And obviously, if we move everything 1 year forward, and if anything is changed in the actual proposition for the Annex 6, then that will have to have an impact on the timeline. But no further information is said at the moment on the topic. So I would say, yes, it will have an impact. How much and what is maybe speculative at the moment. Also, it's unclear whether we will be able to make any decisions in October next year either, which increases the uncertainty of the topic. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that was also very insightful and giving the answer to the question. Yeah, I hope everybody saw the tool where you can actually enter questions into the text box. Few people did so and used it. Other than that, I don't see no other questions coming up. So I think 5 minutes ahead of time, we're able to close this town hall. We will be sharing information on LinkedIn that we actually were holding this town hall with some pictures and text relating to it. Whoever has a LinkedIn account, we would be very much appreciating if you like the post and probably also give a comment on how you like the town hall, and just to be able to expand our reach to the all over, basically all the industry, all the CMAC members. Showing the participant list here today with more than 60 people attending the webinar. I think that's very great attendance already and shows the big interest of the topic to every one of us. That being said, wish you a great weekend, and there will be more to come in the future. There will be more town halls, more reporting about the IMO from CMAC's perspective, and we'll be happy to see you again in the other town halls then. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Thank you, Leo, for this great presentation.
Hi, a nice weekend to everyone.